in the background. I'm sure there'll be a dog barking somewhere along the line too. We're going to be talking about workforce challenges during this time with a lot of focus on what's next. How do we get back to whatever our new normal may be? And we're going to look at it from three perspectives. One of the whole community that may talk about what's happening in your state or in your locality and what the challenges may be there. Mass transit could be an example there for that. But then how are you going to address questions that come up within your offices and the workspace that you use, and what are the challenges that may come with social distancing requirements, for example. And then the third is going to be, how do you deal with the individual questions that your staff are going to have and their various responses to all of this, which are going to be, of course, a very, very wide range of things. I'm going to ask each of our very esteemed panelists to give some brief remarks, as well as to explain who they are and what they do. And then we'll go right into the Q&A. I will be monitoring the question and answer box, and we'll be reading the question back to the individual presenters to ask. With that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. They are Janet McNichol, CAE. She's the Human Resources Director for the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Linda Patterson, FASAE CAE, who is the President and owner of AMPED Association Management. And Lakeisha Ann Woods, CAE, who is the President and CEO of the National Institute of Building Sciences. I think all three of our panelists have a good and great variety of perspectives to share. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda for the trends you're seeing.
Okay, thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here today. With 15 associations managed by AMP with about 50 staff, we've seen the effects of this global pandemic through the lens of many different industries and professions. Starting with a 1,200-person medical meeting at the end of February, where I was likely infected, our staff teams were scared and wanted more information than we frankly did not have. Who was the person? How long were they there? And so on. As things continued to develop, I felt it was important to share my journey and challenges as well. And although not intentional, that helped demonstrate the trust and care for humans that is so integral to our corporate culture. Like many of you, we immediately went into remote work mode in all of our offices, which was very easy for us since we are 100% cloud-based and have a number of employees already working from their homes. We insisted on daily Zoom calls with video on day one and utilized the same remote work policy that we already had in place. It entails such things as core work hours, availability, responsiveness, and so on. These check-ins allow each staff team member to keep an eye on our individual employees and client needs, and it helps to set a cadence and routine to their day. Then our group of executive directors meet at least twice weekly to share trends that they're seeing and talk about realigning staff resources based on client needs in our ever-changing world. And I will note that we have one of our finance and administrative managers that goes in daily to our headquarters office in Madison to handle the mail, packages, plants, and otherwise. And in our DC office, we have a couple of client execs that will go in from time to time to check on things, of course, communicating that ahead of time. Last weekend, we held our first virtual association meeting. The technology was great and staff was busier than ever. Our meeting planner said that instead of finalizing BEOs and counts the week before, she was very busy working with the technology team and the flow of the program. It was very comforting to have her on site in the green room when I logged in. And the point to all of this is that I do see this as an opportunity for staff to develop new skills and truly embrace this change. As we've seen through the power of A in our community, there are so many industries and professions telling their story. In our client mix alone, the fantasy sports and gaming industry is nearly at a halt with no sports. On the other hand, the National Air Filtration Association is busier than ever, keeping our hospital rooms, ICUs, and healthcare facilities with clean air and replacing contaminated air filters. So they were actually relieved when their meeting was canceled. So watching the diverse needs of our clients has been really fascinating and that has allowed our staff to really flex to meet those changing needs and get creative. From a cultural perspective, I am dedicated to keeping that alive and keeping us all connected while we're apart. In fact, since we're not all located in one office, I've seen that we actually come together more frequently and intentionally than we have before. Last night, our happy hour included everyone wearing their state home shirts that we had delivered to them, and we played a state trivia game, going into Zoom breakout rooms with our teams. It was so fun, and the hour just flew by. We also stay connected on Facebook Workplace and Work Chat, and have added some new and practical education to all of our staff meetings. So we have learned from some of our colleagues about the different Zoom plans and package features, using Squarespace to develop simple websites, and using Google Analytics more broadly across our team. My favorite, though, I have to say, has been getting to know one another better across all of our clients and all of our offices, as well as our veteran remote staff, connecting with them, frankly, more than we have even in the past. I feel incredibly lucky that we have not had to lay off staff, and in fact, we have many new projects and associations in the pipeline. However, as I expected, we did have a staff person resign because she felt that with 2 little ones at home, she couldn't do parenting or work very well. The door is open for her to come back, and this just goes back to my philosophy on taking care of our basic needs first, keeping the long view on employee talent, as well as association clients and our members. So as the stay-at-home orders extend, we're encouraging our staff to take time off to recharge mentally and physically. I feel personally, and I know everyone else, without having that separation between home and work, it's more important now than ever to take time for ourselves. Many of us were already experiencing the work-life blend, and this has really only magnified that. So with the unknown future, we are, like many, doing scenario planning on what going to the office will look like in the future, considering all facets this global pandemic has brought. Luckily, both of our offices have plenty of room, so we can safely space out staff if need be, and we have a mix of private offices and semi-private workstations. I will say now, I'm very grateful that we didn't go with the open office concept. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Lakeisha, especially as the president and CEO of the National Institute of Building Sciences, I expect there's probably a lot you can add to this conversation right now.
Well, I started my role with NIBS about 1.5 years ago. And when I came into the organization, it was very much a in the office-based system. So we had started the process last year of adding a little more flexibility for the staff. We did a staff survey, and those were the pieces that people really wanted to have, the flex hours, the telework. So early last year, we invested in the technology tools in order for our staff to have laptops, for our network to go to the cloud, and also just to provide upgraded systems in general. And so we transitioned our phone systems, and now if you call our phone lines, you will still get our receptionist who can direct you to me. Or if you call direct to the phone, it will just, if you call my direct line, it'll still ring to my cell phone through an app. So I didn't even need to put a note out to our members that we're not in our offices, because to anyone who's trying to reach us, it's still the same exact systems, the same phone numbers, the same email. We're just in a different office location. So our offices are still active. And I'm really glad we had already put those tools in place last year, because it was easy for us to transition to remote work for our staff. The only piece that wasn't is we were still in the process of moving our accounting systems to the cloud and transitioning accounting systems, which, if anybody's been through that, doesn't happen overnight. So we did have some steps in place where we needed to make some adjustments and get things scanned a little faster so that our team could have that flexibility. But our industry, our purpose as an organization is to bring the built environment together. It's great having had a career in the construction space to now work for the organization where all my former associations are now my members, because we don't represent one individual area. We want to bring the architects, the engineers, code officials, all those various groups together, talk about common problems and how to find solutions. We also do a lot of work with the federal government, working on finding solutions in scenarios that are disaster, hazard mitigation. So when Hurricane Katrina happened, the Army Corps of Engineers called us and said, how do we fix it? So as it comes to doing all that research, the work that we do is still easy to do remote. It's research, it's a computer wherever you are. And we have meetings because we're conveners. And so now we have transitioned our systems to make those moves digitally like most people have. The one complaint that I received from everybody when I came on board about the old way of doing business was they hated that we had a meeting, our annual meeting in DC in January every year. They said, why do you have it? And everybody told some sob story about snowstorms or this horrible scenario of trying to get to DC in the cold. So to make everybody happy, I moved our meeting to April. Now that wasn't such a great idea. But we made the adjustment just like everyone else, and we actually moved our meeting to later in the year. So like many people, we are sitting and hoping and waiting that people can gather later this fall. But if not, we are also planning, as everyone must do, to also prepare for what would be a digital event. And at least this push in time allowed us the flexibility to look at all the various options and look at those of our association partners out there who are doing virtual conferences now to see what worked and what didn't. So we're very happy to learn from your mistakes or your successes, and then be able to implement those when our time comes if we need to do that virtual meeting. As far as running our office, our workforce, our team stays very engaged. As a 501c3, and for those of you who are 501c3s and aren't familiar, the Office 365 from Microsoft is available for free. So we had the package, and the team apparently had never used it. So now for chat, people use Teams. We have our staff weekly meetings. We have it every Friday morning, and everybody's got to put on their video. We want to see your face no matter what. Today, one of our staff showed off her new blonde hair, which was lovely on her darker complexion. But it was just, fun to see somebody whose wife decided to cut his hair and what that turned out to be. And it's been amazing how just those personal connections that that's what they miss the most. They want to hear the story about how people are managing their kids and their job. We had, of course, a firm telework policy in place, but just like anything, you have to be willing to make adjustments. Our team, we've tried to set some core hours between 10 and 3 if everybody can try to be online. But we also recognize that it doesn't work perfectly for everyone. And if you are a parent or two parents that are balancing who has to do homeschooling, who's going to sit their kids in front of screen time all day, we just ask that you find a way to get your hours in. And so for me, I've told my team, get the work you need to get done in the time that you can do it. And that's our goal. And I think the flexibility with my team has been helpful. And then also just us staying connected virtually. It's been fascinating to watch some people's responses to, what do you mean? How much longer are we going to be here? I thought for sure that the team would turn around and say, I can't wait for us to be able to work remote forever. And they're like, no, I want to go back to the office as soon as possible. So It's just interesting to see how this will all unfold. I definitely plan to have some flexibility with, our telework policy was originally you could telework up to 3 days a week, but that was also to guide our leadership into trusting that our staff team could work remote and still get the job done. So now that the whole country, the whole world has had to go remote, it allows that conversation to happen to say, what roles, what positions work well in a remote full-time environment? And then what others do need to come together at least once or twice a week in order to be most effective? I think as a leader, it's important to be flexible. And so I've always tried to make sure that I'm doing that and keeping my team happy and supportive. I was on a call earlier this week, and a woman who heads up a major ad firm in New York City, and she said that she found herself as the chief energy officer, that's what her role had transitioned to. And I said, I'm stealing that line, because I think now more than ever, our teams need to feel energized and important, and that you care, truly care about their health, safety, sanity. The work will get done if your team knows that you believe in them. And so that has been very important to me, trying to find ways for them to still feel connected, but also to know that the work that we do is important. We're lucky to not have any layoffs, and a majority of our revenue currently comes from a lot of federal contracts that we do. But again, it's about looking at taking this, we can't change what's happening right now, but we can take this opportunity to look at it in a new way and say, how can we recreate what we do? How can we sure, we've always had our annual meeting once a year in person. Is there another way for us to convene people? Is there another way for us to be more effective in reaching our audience? And allow your team to come up with those ideas and bring them together. You could recreate your organization in a way that makes it even more effective. And it took a crisis to make it happen. But I think this is a great opportunity, and happy to talk through other workforce topics.
Well, and thank you very much. We should never waste a good crisis, right? So, Janet McNichol, from the HR side.